Welcome to the afternoon session of our first day of Nature Relationships and Well-Being online forum. So to start us off this afternoon, we have the pleasure to have with us Margaret Hansen. She's a professor emerita at the University of San Francisco, and she's going to be sharing today with us about the interrelationship between Shinrin-yoku, nature therapy, and spirituality. Margaret has published a few studies already in this field of Shinrin-yoku and nature therapy. So Margaret's going to be creating a conversation with the audience around this topic today. So thank you so much for being with us, Margaret. We're really looking forward to our time together. So please take us away.
Okay, thank you so very much. It's a deep honor to be here with all of you. A little bit about my interest in Shinrin-yoku, which literally translates out to be forest bathing and nature therapy. Back in 2015, I read about it just by happenstance, and I was fascinated by it. And I think it's primarily because of my affection and affiliation with nature since I was a child. I went to summer camp in the San Bernardino Mountains and then went on to become a Campfire Girl counselor and led children up and down mountains and overnight camping. So I had a real deep connection. I've been an avid hiker and lover of nature for a long time. And so back in 2015, when I was reading about it, I went to my librarian at USF and said, hey, I'm really interested in this. I want to review it. I want to review the literature. And at that time, I had a teaching assistant and research assistant, Rio Jones, who just now got her PhD in nursing. So I call her now Dr. Jones. And another undergraduate student who was in my research methods class at the University of San Francisco. And I brought them into my office and I said, hey, I'm really interested in this. And how about writing a review paper? And we published that one in 2017. And that's been quite a popular paper. I then went in 2018 and visited Professor Miyazaki. He's coined the father of Shinrin-yoku at Shiba University in Tokyo. And actually, Amos was visiting there and he gave me a call. Remember that, Amos? He gave me a call from a taxi in Tokyo saying that he had met with Professor Miyazaki. And so Amos and I go back, probably back to around 2016 as colleagues.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm grateful for this affiliation with the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. Thrilled to be here today. So we wrote that paper and we reviewed probably around 69 papers. And that was primarily on the physiological and the psychological benefits of immersing oneself in forest or in nature. And then I got really curious about the spiritual part of it, because as an integrative medicine practitioner and believer of integrative medicine, I know that the mind, body, and spirit are all connected. And actually, I remember vividly talking to Professor Miyazaki and bringing up Shinto, the religion or the way of the Japanese. I actually asked him through a translator what his thoughts were about the spirit being connected to this science that he was primarily, he's since retired, but he was heavily into looking at the physiological reactions of the human body to being immersed in forest and nature. And so he kind of just smiled at me, didn't really go into great detail about it, but I went into and looked into Shinto and Shintoism. And then actually, Shin means spirit, but Shinrin means forest. So right there in front of us is the Japanese term Shin. So we have some spirit going on already just in the title. Many scholars do recognize Shinto as a religion. However, some practitioners just see it as a way. And then I went into it a little bit deeper and found that Shin in Korean means belief, faith, or trust. So back, after that 2017 paper, then I really got interested in the spirituality of how we're connecting our spirits with nature. And so being a scientific writer and a lover of writing reviews, I called up now Dr. Jones and said, how about writing a paper with me on the spiritual aspect? Because I just did a real cursory literature review, and there really wasn't, there was a dearth of research in really connecting spirituality with Shinrin Yoku. So the present study that I was asked to present today by ANFT undertakes a really scoping review of the interrelationship between Shinrin Yoku, nature therapy, and human spirituality to determine the extent that spirituality research has been conducted. And I'm going to present some of those findings for you today. But first, let's dive into this. I love this quote by John Muir. John Muir has been a big part of my connection with nature. And he wrote, "Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to the body and soul." So, as we all know, artists, poets, religious leaders, spiritual seekers, naturalists, adventurers, they all note things about nature and pretty much kind of bring in some spirit along with their connection with nature. So let's come over here. So the aim of my presentation is to provide a brief overview of the relationship between contact with nature and spirituality, to highlight results of a scoping review of the literature regarding current evidence of the interrelationship of Shinrin Yoku, nature, and spirituality, to identify the conceptual frameworks that Dr. Jones and I found and identified in the literature supporting this research question that we had about the interrelationship of nature and spirituality. I'm going to add on, and this isn't in the paper, well, a bit of the eco-theology is in the paper, but I am going to bring in some new concepts or ways, actually. One is eco-chaplaincy and shamanism as new frameworks for our next study. So I want you just to pause for a moment and write in, maybe if you have access to the chat on the Zoom. I used to teach via Zoom, and I love this chat feature because I would ask my students questions and they would chat their answers, and then later I would go and look at the chat responses, and they were really fun to read. But if you feel like you want to, you can And I like to have my audience be interactive instead of just being a talking head up here. If you want to, within your chat box, how do you identify yourself, or what is this? What does it mean for you, this contact with nature as individuals? It can be a one word, it can be a few words, it can be a sentence. You do not have to respond, but I'm curious for you to think or to ponder for a moment what contact with nature means for you as individuals. Why do you go out and seek natural spaces? Or why do you buy houseplants? Or why do you plant a bush in your garden? What does that mean for you? The next question I have is, or for you to ponder, is connect with what spirituality means for you as individuals. Spirituality, we'll go into the definition of that in a few minutes, but spirituality has been coined or has been kind of differentiated away from religion, okay? So what does that word mean for you as an individual? And then we're all about well-being, correct? And I like that the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy put well-being into their title for this wonderful symposium. And so we're going to explore that spiritual well-being and how connecting the mind, body, and spirit can give you a holistic view for yourself or for your patients or for your friends or your family members. So these are just three things I'd like you to take a moment, pause, and consider for your own self. I'll give you a few seconds here and let you think about that.
Margaret, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I realized when I put my message into the text that it went directly to Amos. And when I went to change the audience, it doesn't appear as though I have access to everybody, only the hosts. I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but just so you're aware.
Yeah.
I apologize. No, you're really breaking up. I can't even understand you. Possibly it's on my end. I'm sorry.
So,
Okay.
Margaret, we can read out the chat if you want. This is something in the settings, but we can see the messages and can read them out.
Yes. Participate.
And your audio is breaking up.
I microphone you able to see?
It might be the headphones.
Okay, let me take the phone off. Is that okay? Hold on. Here. Here.
No, it's not really working.
No. Okay.
Can you unplug and plug them in again?
Them off again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay,
Perfect.
so it was just rebooting. Okay, so I think perhaps maybe all of you are already familiar with the definition of Shinrin Yoku, but it's an integrated practice known to actually improve human physiological, and psychological health and well-being by mindfully using your 5 human senses while relaxing in natural environments. This can be a forest, it could be by the sea, but it's really being mindful of using all 5 of your senses. It was originally coined in the 80s by the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. So what they did, which was really interesting, is that they decided to create a park in Tokyo, a very peaceful setting for people to go to during their lunch break or before or after work. As we know that probably the Japanese are a group or a culture that are highly motivated and work very hard, probably under a lot of stress a lot of the time. But the Japanese government in the early 80s had this vision to create this park and to then look at the ancient practice of Shinrin-yoku. And there's been multiple studies conducted over the past 40 years that really demonstrated the physiological and psychological health benefits of Shinrin-yoku. And that was highlighted in our 2017 paper. There is, as I said earlier, there's really a lot of scientific literature lacking, and that is directly connecting the relationship between spirituality and Shinrin-yoku. So that was one of the reasons why we went ahead. And let me give you a little bit of a background of the interest, the rationale behind Dr. Jones and I conducting this study. We had, as healthcare providers, we are always interested in research regarding the health and economic benefits of being in nature. And we noticed that it was gaining worldwide, okay? A lot of the literature or the scientific research has been done primarily in Asian countries. But we notice that there's an increase in non-communicable diseases. And what I mean by that is such as stress, cardiovascular disease, obesity, depression, diabetes. Those are just some of the non-communicable diseases that we're seeing on the rise. And so the past researchers, for example, Professor Miyazaki or Professor Lee, those are some of the top researchers who have written actually multiple studies and actually written books on Shinrin-yoku. But they were primarily interested in looking at the physiological and then a little bit later on the psychological. So the word spirituality is derived from the Latin word of spiritus, which means breath of life, and may shadow the Greek word actually of pneuma, meaning a person's spirit guided by God's spirit. Pneuma also meaning the breath of life. There's some researchers that we found when we were doing our literature search and reading these papers. Kamitis and Francis state that spirituality is an individual's inner experience and or belief system that gives meaning to existence and subsequently allows one to connect with the world in a way that may not seem logical or even concrete. 78% of the American public, I just recently read this, report a need to experience spiritual growth. Researchers have suggested that spirituality be seen as an individual construct, transcendent, the non-material and sacred aspects of existence and the universe. Some words that we found during our research were joy, harmony, and peacefulness. Those are being affiliated with the term spirituality. So recent evidence suggests nature promotes spiritual well-being, and I will go over a few of those studies a little bit later on in my presentation if there's time. And the World Health Organization defines an individual's well-being as an awareness of one's fullest possible physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and economic self. Recently was reading that Thailand, during their health reform movement, successfully incorporated human spirituality into the country's health definition. Their health definition is a dynamic state of physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. So we all know that the beauty of nature and its impact on humans is well documented by the naturalists, photographers, etc., as I said earlier. But I still am interested to see if there are quantitative or qualitative research that are specifically being conducted. And that was the reason why we went forward with this study and then published this paper. So in 2020, the scoping review was published, and the aim of this inquiry was to research the interrelatedness of Shinrin-yoku, a form of nature-based therapy and human spirituality. And does spending time in nature promote human spirituality? That was our research question. We conducted a scoping review of the literature with regard to the evidence of the interrelationship of Shinrin-yoku, nature, and spirituality, to identify gaps in the literature. And I always want to encourage researchers to read my reviews and then go out and conduct their own scientific research projects. Okay. A lot of the findings were qualitative, meaning they were interviews or some surveys. There were not many quantitative studies. So while we were doing our research, we came across some conceptual frameworks. And conceptual frameworks are always kind of a cool thing to identify because it gives you some footing or gives you some groundwork to explain and support things that you're researching. And so what we came across, Leo and I, is the concept of awe, sacred place, and eco-theology. Those were the three main ones. I also want to add in the spirit of wonder. I don't know how many of you seen the recent Netflix program called Penelope, but the opening scene, when I was watching that opening scene of this young girl going into nature, I could literally feel her expression on her face of wonder and awe as she went into the forest, which was really, really, really cool for me. But we definitely saw that awe and sacred place and eco-theology were conceptual frameworks that popped up in the literature. And we also did some research into E.O. Wilson and biophilia. That's explained in our paper as well. So what is awe? What does awe mean to you? So the literature is giving us a definition of, according to these researchers, their name is Bethlemy and Coralizas in 2019. From their research, they had results that we identified as the concept of awe was described as vast, vulnerable, mysterious, powerful, and elicited feelings of vulnerability, fragility, respect for nature, threat, and fear. And this brings up a really good point that not everyone is so relaxed in nature. There's that fight-flight response that we get, like when Penelope was actually attacked by a panther or a big bobcat, and that can sometimes I've read in the literature that people are really like they're scared to go into nature, and so we need to be aware of that as practitioners, that not everyone is going to be all, feeling relaxed in nature. So I found that really interesting, that these researchers described it in that way. These same researchers, I was really excited to come across this. They developed a sublime emotion toward nature scale, which is a quantitative way of measuring awe. And they conducted and they actually came out with quite a good reliability and validity analysis of that 18-item scale, the sublime emotion scale. So that 18-item scale is really looking at a mixture of human emotions such as pleasure, vitality, and arousal, combined with feelings of awe in nature as perceived as vast, powerful, and complex. Keltner and Haight in 2003, pioneer researchers of the human emotion of awe, conducted a literature review to further the understanding of the concept of awe, and central to the findings were two central themes. The stimulus is vast and it requires accommodation. Vastness is a feeling of something that is larger than ourselves. And many people look at spirituality as the higher power, not necessarily the term God or religion, but vastness is something bigger than ourselves. So nature and that concept of awe, which is bringing in some idea of spirituality, okay? Awe we can't touch, right? It's an emotion, it's a feeling. So whereas these same researchers found accommodation is in reference to a Piagetian way of adjusting our mental structures when we are assimilating new experiences. Okay, so these are the conceptual frameworks that we found in our research. Here's just that slide for you that I just talked about. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong slide. Wilderness, I love this quote too by Emerson. And this appears in his paper on nature. In the wilderness, I find something more dear and cognate than in the streets and villages. In the tranquil landscape, and especially in the distant line of the horizon, man beholds somewhat as beautiful. The greatest delight which the fields and woods minister is the suggestion of an occult relation between man and vegetable. I love that with vegetable. Thank you, Emerson. Thank you very much. I just put that in there to break things up. Then we came across the concept of sacred space, and I think we've all encountered sacred spaces. I have the great privilege to live on Bainbridge Island, and Gasm Preserve is just probably about a 5 or 7 minute drive from my home, where I like to visit because it is my sacred space. It's my sanctuary. I find a great amount of awe and wonder and vastness there. I feel connected to my spirit and a higher power in Gasm. It's a very forested nature preserve with a lake. But to get back to some researchers, Fredrickson and Anderson conducted a qualitative study looking at place-related concepts such as sacred space and a sense of the divine. And they used this as a starting point to anchor the exploration of potential connections between wilderness-based play setting and spiritual benefits the participants gained from being in nature. So this was another conceptual framework. We analyzed 30 papers, and 13 of those met the eligibility criteria and were included in our research synthesis. Despite the different research methods and publications, nature was found to have a potential positive effect on human spirituality and hence enriching individuals' well-being. What we found were categories from these 30 studies that we reviewed. And I've listed them here for you. Primarily, and these slides will be available to you after my presentation. But if you're interested in looking at this connection between spirituality and nature therapy, some of these categories might be a launching point for your research. Wilderness experience and spirituality, nature-based recreation and spirituality, nature connectedness and self-healing, spiritual experiences in nature, spirituality as a conduit between engagement with nature and psychological well-being, healing the spirit through experiencing the natural world. Spiritual well-being supported by nature-based activities offer a complementary aspect to the physical, mental, and social well-being. And once again, I want to go back to Thailand's health reform movement and their definition that it's a dynamic state of physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. So that is connected with some of that last category that we found in the studies that we researched. And this paper is available. I'll make this paper available. I'll give it to Geeta, and she can post it on the website if it's not already there. Another central theme that emerged from this study was spiritual value, which actually had some sub-themes, articulation of a sense of solace and peacefulness, commonality and connection, happiness and feeling at one and at home in nature, power greater than the self, divine presence, or mystery. So those are just some of those categories that came from our research. Here, there was a group that actually did some research. Let me see what that group was. They interviewed 10 children, 4 boys and 6 girls. Oh, that's Van Vieren and Keller in 2013. So, and they were doing this study with these children because of nature deficit disorder. With so many screens being used by children, oftentimes parents or teachers would like to have them more immersed in nature. And I guess, citing the work of Richard Louv on nature deficit disorder that was coined in 2008. The researchers interviewed 10 children, and they were ages 7 to 8, on their experiences of nature. I love this. Children were also asked to identify religious affiliation. 2 children were Catholic, 3 as Lutheran, 1 as Protestant, 1 as Episcopalian, with the remaining children identifying as atheist or a-religious. And that's interesting because my daughter came to me, I think she was around the age of 8, and she said, I don't believe in God. That's interesting that at that young of an age, someone would have that idea. But a central theme that emerged from this study was spiritual value. And I already went through the sub-themes, but the qualitative responses were really interesting, describing a felt sense that nature was very powerful. These are children, 7 and 8 years old. Nature seems really big Oh, and the trees offered protection from inclement weather. Some children noted that I feel much closer to God when I'm in nature. And these researchers noted children's feelings of awe, wonder, and excitement in nature, a sense of value in the patterns and beauty as integral to the experience of appreciation of the natural world. And when I reflect back on my own childhood experience being in nature, and mind you, I'm not biased. Of course, I'm biased. As a researcher, all of those qualitative responses by those children are spot on, at least for me and my reflection of when I was a child. I'm going to give some time here for answers and questions. So I'm just going to go through these slides really quickly. Eco is a Latin word for home, which I find to be really interesting because ecological, you know, all the eco words are beginning with home. It is a form of spiritual care with socio-environmental challenges through acceptance, resilience, and renewal of one's relationship with nature. Deeply grounded in humanity's relationship with nature versus a particular religion. The primary root is in caring for the planet, and we all are at that point. I don't know if you've heard of John Seed, but he was interviewed by Tammy Simon a few months ago, and I kept that interview. And he is an environmentalist who's done a lot of rainforest research and how the research around us being such an egocentric society or such a human-centered versus being more cosmic or he has this understanding, and I think I brought in one of his quotes here on the slides. He has more of this, he's asking us as a society to understand that we are nature, that we at the cellular level are all interconnected with the cosmos and the natural world. So you can become an eco chaplain. Then there's Buddhist eco chaplaincy. I put in the links for the online training program. And these are individuals that work to support others in developing healthy, compassionate, and mutually supportive relationships with one another and with the natural world. Eco-theology, we found that as a conceptual framework. It came about in the 1990s. It's an English translation of the Greek oikos, theos, and logos. And the eco-theologians believe that there's a relationship between human, religious, spiritual worldviews and preservation of nature. Thank you. Thank you. I love this. So here we have eco, home, theology. So they're really pointing us in the direction of, I'm just glad we did this review because it really is putting a spotlight and highlighting my curiosity, and I'm sure all of your curiosity about how we are connected with nature at the spiritual level. Articulation of a sense of solace and peacefulness, commonality and connection, happiness and feeling at one at home in nature, power greater than self and divine presence or mystery. That's a quote by Van Buren and Keller. Then I love shamanism. Oh, this is a very ancient way. I don't have much time to go into great depth about shamanism, but I've been really interested in shamanism probably since grammar school when I was drawing Indian sweat houses and looking at shamans back then. But every being and every single thing has spirit, consciousness, from animals to plants to mountains, lakes, and planets. So, and here we have nature as a sacred, alive, and imbued with spirits and energies. That's a definition of shamanism. And here, shamans have an extremely deep connection with the natural world. Okay, they learn from plants. So they themselves learn from plants, animals, rocks, mountains, winds, waters, sun, moon, and the stars to assist individuals to live one with the universe. So here are some questions for you. We're running out of time. I'm so sorry. But here, I want you to do this activity. So these are photographs taken in the Pacific Northwest by Mr. Joe Richards. And I want you to look at them. And in the chat box, I want you to identify which one you feel most connected at the spiritual level. Which one do you feel most connected with in the concept of awe? And which one do you feel the most connected with sacred space? So, questions and answers. I am so sorry I ran over. I had too much. I thought I wouldn't have enough. I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to have enough. How long? Yeah. I see somebody has their hand raised. Let me look at it. Yes. Hi. Unmute. I'm going to unmute
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Martha Brunel from Chicago.
Hi, Martha.
When I trained with ANFT in 21-22, I was a coyote, and I probably came into this training with the deepest experience as a spiritual practitioner. I was in my 43rd year professionally in this field. And my primary concern when I began training online was, how was I going to need to adapt my language? I had done earthwork for a long time, but how was I going to need to adapt my language to work with ever wider communities of people? And what I discovered fairly quickly, that everybody who was putting the materials together for ANFT was simply a contemplative, and they didn't know it, because I have not had to adapt my language at all. The primary concepts of this training are deeply embedded in a strain of mysticism that goes all the way back in every tradition that you can name. And for me, the contemporary person who, in the fewest words, describes the essence of spirituality is Potawatomi woman Robin Wall Kimmerer. And spirituality is an architecture of relatedness, which is really what our ANFT training is about when we work both with relationship and also with well-being. This is where I live. I do a lot of work with environmental educators who always tell me, oh, Martha, you're able to put the language to what we all do. And it was in that community that I first said, I live at the intersection of spiritual practice and earth wisdom. And that really, for me, is where spirituality emerges in a very natural conversation. Because the core of a contemplative spirituality and the core of nature writers, big and small, line up parallel. I'm not talking about institutional religious. I got a long background in that.
No. Right.
That's not what I'm talking about. But the core of a contemplative spirituality and the core of a earth wisdom based understanding of the world are natural conversation partners. And so if that's anything anybody's interested in, I talk about it all the time. So thank you for your work today.
Oh, thank you. And would you be willing to email me your contact information and
Sure.
maybe write for the everyone who's attending this session the references in the chat that you referred to?
I'm sorry, the what referred to?
The references of the book that you referred to.
Oh, Robin Wall Kimmerer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would love that. I would love to have that as a reference.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
if you have not read Braiding Sweetgrass, you should stop whatever you're doing
No,
now.
I have.
Well,
have- I have-
it's right out of there. So, but yes, I will put
know,
my contact
okay.
information in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I think I only am able to take one question or one comment. It's been a deep pleasure being with all of you today, and thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share with you my passion and love for nature and spirituality. Thank you.
Thank you